Thank you for joining me today at A Touch of Blue Studio with Drawing with Grandma. Welcome back to my studio, A Touch of Blue. You might recall that we, in the last demonstration, did a sketch of this wolf on canvas, and then I prepared my palette with this limited palette of colors, which is Payne's Gray, Burnt Umber, and White, to develop my grays and browns to establish an underpainting. So we ended up with this wolf study, and I needed to let it dry before I moved forward with more richer colors and some glazing and details. So now we're ready to begin. So you can see I've kind of smoothed out some of the marks that I've made and tried to unite the limited palette colors as much as I could. I'm now applying another color, which is yellow ochre, and it's a beautiful yellow brown. So it's going to add some warmth overall to his fur. It's going to kind of emphasize the sunlight hitting him and give a good contrast of all that gray. So gray and gold together are a beautiful color palette combination and scheme that is very inviting for nature and those kinds of subject matter. So I'm going to work in this yellow ochre into the semi-dry underpainting. If I'm going to do only glazing, then I need to wait for it to be completely dry, but I'm working another layer of color choices over my semi-dry underpainting, and that's another method. Sometimes I'm too impatient to wait till it completely dries, but it is recommended if you want to do a lot of transparent glazes. So we're just going to work in the yellow ochre into some of the shadows to warm them up, and then we will definitely come back and deepen some of the more important contrasted areas later. You can see the shadow under his nose. I really wanted to emphasize that. To get the 3D illusion of his nose protruding, I need to make sure that those nostrils and the front of his nose are well done. And then to shape and correct just all of the features so that they are working well together. Some of these grays are just beautiful. I love blue gray, and then warming them up with the golden browns in a lot of my nature paintings. There's a lot of blue-gray in his ears, and on the right side of his arms we don't see them, but I need to make sure that right side is well deepened with the gray so that it kind of brings our eye to that chest where there's going to be a lot more interaction of the fur together. So with every stroke, I've mentioned before, I want to emphasize the direction of the fur, try to get some of the strokes to look like bunches of fur. Of course, we're not going to get every strand, but we can suggest clumps of hair and how it's laying naturally, and then blend those grays, golds, and whites together. That white area that frames his face really is important in order to bring our attention back to that eye area, the nose, the focal point. Okay, I need to reshape some of these darkest areas again and to give them a little bit more contrast against that chest. I want to touch up the eye, re-emphasize the shape. Sometimes I lose it when I work around it too much. The inside of the ears are I don't use black. I know I've said that I'm using black, but actually I'm making my own black with Payne's Gray, and then I add other dark colors, and it looks black, but I didn't use any black for this painting, and I'm trying to avoid it because sometimes gray dulls color, black can dull color so much, and it looks like just a hole on the canvas. You want to keep using saturated colors and try to avoid black unless it's really necessary for you to mix it with something. I'm going to try to find that center of the head. Make sure that that line draws our attention down to the snout. And then use every brush stroke to kind of lay that hair as beautifully as I can. Could spend hours on this, just layering and layering and layering and focusing on detail and detail. But I probably won't stick with this much longer. I like to do these as studies, and it's enough for me just to practice and to develop these small paintings into my sketchbook. So I do them on canvas paper usually, and then when they're dry, if somebody wants it, I will frame it. If it's really a good study, I might try to sell the prints. But usually they're just for studies and sketchbook, so I'll put them in my portfolio. So this left side needs to have some bright light. We want to take those little strands of hair into the background now. You saw that I laid a color in the background that is more of a grayish blue. I'm not sure there might be too much glare in the photo right now, but I think you'll see it at the end when I can photograph it adequately. And I just want to take a lot of that fullness of the hair around him into the background and just add kind of a puffiness to him. And then focus on these really bright highlights. There on the left of the snout, the right. Beautiful bright white areas. Shape his cheek. All right, here he is, pretty close to being done, and I will photograph him and get him up on my website. Just some final touches and we'll be on our way. You can see I'm using a very small brush now, which I don't usually use, but the final touches I like to use it for a little bit of emphasis on the eyes or some strands. So here he is, our little wolf. Thank you for joining me today at A Touch of Blue Studio with Drawing and Painting with Grandma.